Now I want to make a video about the most important topic actually in this class, which is the building of a system. I had to wait until I got a certain amount of material together. I now have enough to be talking about this. The way I'm going to present it on the tutorial page is actually going to be at the start of when we start making the mock-ups, but I had to wait until now to actually do it. Now, when you look at this whole thing here that I have, it's all kind of hanging together. Now, there are reasons for that, and firstly, it's about the logotype, of course, which is always there, and which we can look at up close, like so. I mostly use it with a green background, but I have the option to use it with other backgrounds as well. So far I haven't done that. Now the font that I'm using here, which I first used for the address, is Barlow. So that is the system font, that is the font of this identity. This is the logo, and then when we kind of come here, this is roughly the color scheme. So I have a complementary color scheme, a complementary contrast color scheme between this bright blue and the brick color, to which I have added a gray and a pinkish sort of beige. And what I'm doing is I'm using these elements, these three elements, the logotype, the font, which is Barlow again, and the color scheme, over and over and over again. But then I also have certain elements that I'm using over and over again, such as, for example, these two plants here. You can see them here on the shopping bag. You can see them on the towels. You can see it on the car. Some more towels again. I'm not using them all the time, but I'm using them some of the time. Then I have this big lying cat, which is kind of like very similar, or actually it's not similar, it's identical in style to the logo cat, because they come from the same file. They were created by the same person as part of a pattern, and I'm using this big lying cat in many different ways as well. So for example, here I'm using it as a pattern on the package. Here it's really big on the towel. Then there's a third cat which belongs to the same family, which again comes from the same file. So these are stylistically consistent. But then I'm also using other visual material, such as these bees here, for example. But because I'm using the same font, which is Barlow, it's Barlow here again, and because I have the logotype, we still have the stylistic consistency. Here, again, all of this text here is Barlow. So, the system font, the identity font, is actually something very, very important that you need to pay a lot of attention to when you're choosing it, because as you can see, you're not just going to be using it in the address. You're going to be using it in many, many different ways. So for example, here we have these coffee, this pouch and the mug, and again this is Barlow, same here. Well, here we have the repetition of the address, so that's not going to be terribly unusual that is the same. But then if I come back here again, Barlow, so the font, the system font, the font of the identity, that is something that you really, really need to think about. So what do we pay attention to? We pay attention to choosing an adaptable font that we can use both as an address and as a label for a honey jar, but then also as in a completely different way with bold weights for this cosmetics set, And then again for this here, so let's just go back. So here I'm using it in this way, or except for the logo, which is a different font. That's the logo font. Everything that you see here is Barlow, and it's used in a lightweight. But then when we come here, it's used in much bolder weights. It's a semi-bold, but it's the same font. So we have the stylistic consistency, and then if we go back up again to the honey jars, again it's the same font. It's used in a light, in fact even a thin weight as far as I can remember, except here it's bold. But although here it is placed on a circle and here it is used straight, and here it is used on an arc, and then here it is used as an address in a very plain, simple way. And here, for example, we have it as a label sticker. Because it's always the same thing, it's always the same font, that gives us the consistency of the system. So that's one of the things that you need to pay attention to. Now, it doesn't really matter if you use it always left aligned, although it's a good idea to use it consistently as much as you can, but there will be cases where you will not be able to do that. So for example, in this classical pouch, or this here, this is a very classical design which calls for a centered approach, so I've centered everything here, but the important thing is that I have maintained the font consistency. Again, with the circular design, I would not have been able to use this in a left aligned way, but it is still working. Here I have used everything in a left aligned way, so this system here is actually very consistent with the way in which I have used the address, and I will try to do that as much as I can, although I know that there will be exceptions when I will not be able to do that, and that is fine so long as I have the same consistent font. And one thing to add to the font thing is also that right now I'm only using this on the address and on these labels here. However, in the future, this font is also going to get used on the website, on social media posts, in brochures, in catalogs, all kinds of things. So you need to also make sure that when you are selecting your font, that you have a readable font, that you have a legible font which can also be read when it is in a large paragraph, like when there's lots and lots of it in a small point size as a paragraph. And so what you need to look for is a font that has a big family. So bolds, blacks, semi-bolds for sure, but then also regulars, mediums, and then going down to lights, to extra lights, to thins, and even if you can find one, they're not that easy to find, but even one that has a hairline. Now I only have one font here, which is Barlow. That doesn't have to be like that. You can also have two system fonts, in which case I would advise you to have one of them a serif and the other one a sans serif, and choose your serif also from one of the fonts that have lightweights, like Cormorant for example, so that you can use it in paragraph texts. So adaptability, it has to be a font that can be applied to many different things. Legibility, because you're also going to be using it as paragraph text, and a big family, so that you don't always end up using the same boring weight, so that you can switch from thin to black, to extra bold, to hairline, because that will also make your design system far more versatile. Now let's come to the colors. Outside of the exception of this little lavender here, which I just basically used because it's Bursa lavender honey, so that I just thought that it would be nice to have a lavender color here, but that's pretty much the only exception. and because it's on an orange honey jar, then that's appeared to be okay to me in terms of design consistency. But as you can see, with everything else, I am sticking to that color scheme. And again, I have chosen that color scheme because I knew that it would be versatile, that I would be able to use it in many different ways because it's a complementary contrast. They are bright colors, and I knew that they would go very well with black, white, and gray, which I have told you many times are your best friends. So when you choose your colors, when you put together your color scheme on the color wheel, you should always think of it in relation to the black, white, and gray. And speaking of the black, white, and gray, another thing that I have done here on this big assembled thing is I am always using the same background. Now the background isn't really part of the design, and as a matter of fact, the mock-up isn't even part of the design. The mock-up is just what you put things on. It's not something that is important in and of itself. It's just important in the sense that it's a container that allows you to implement your design. But I have made all of these backgrounds the same, and I have made them gray because I know that this gray gradient background is actually going to help me present my design. It's not going to interfere with the design. It's just going to be there in the background. It's not going to be prominent, and I've chosen something like that for this letterhead thing as well. So that is what I would strongly advise you to do, is to create a neutral gray, black and white background, and to keep and use it over and over and over again, not get fancy. Don't try to make one background red and one background pink and then another one I don't know what color, because you will need to present this as a whole, not necessarily in the way that I'm showing you right now. It could be a website, it could be a Tumblr blog, it's certainly going to be your Behance project, and people are going to look at it as a whole. What they need to see is the design. It's not the background. The background needs to be neutral. Now let me see, what else should I be talking about here? The same, I keep using the same elements over and over. I have already mentioned that. So that should cover it in terms of system creation. You try to create objects that look nice by themselves, but the more important thing is that they should look nice together, that the motorbike should look in harmony. It should look from the same family as the towels or the shopping bag, or even this here, although this looks quite different from this, but because of the fonts and the colors, it creates a consistency. Or this and this, although they are different objects, completely different usages, the car, the pouch, the towels, the shopping bag, the gift package, they belong to the same family. They share the same visual attributes, and that is something that you really need to focus on when you are putting together your mock-up package. Now, one thing that will help you is to create a brief in your head. A brief is the thing that your client tells you about themselves, about their company, and they give you their wishes for the design. So I kind of invented a little story here, that this is Tekir Efendi, who is a spice merchant, or a dry goods merchant actually, an aktar in Turkish. So their young son studied business administration and decided to overhaul the old family company, which in my story goes back to 1894. I have that written right here, and I have it also written here, 1894. So this is an old company respectable old establishment, dry goods merchant, spice merchant, but the young son has different ideas, and he wants to turn this into something much more ambitious, something that sells things much more than just spices. So he has created all of these sublines, subcategories, and they are diversifying. Now, one thing in the brief that Sarman Tekir Efendi, that's the young lad who is now in charge of things, has given me in my story is that he says, I don't want something old-fashioned. I don't want this to look like an old-fashioned place. I want to have a young design because I want to appeal to a young audience. I want to have young customers. I'm going to be making food. I'm going to be making body products. I'm going to be making household items. I'm going to be selling coffee. Potentially in the future I might actually go and make clothing. So this is going to be a kind of like a department store almost. And I don't want to have my old customers only. I have them already. They already know about me. I want to have a young clientele. So he asked me to design him a young looking branding identity, not something that is old-fashioned. So that's my story. That's the story that I invented, and I would advise you to do the same. I would advise you to sit down and think about what kind of a company is this, what is their sales strategy, what kind of an audience are they trying to appeal to, young people, old people, middle-aged people, rich people, poor people, university educated, not whatever. I mean, to kind of like establish a demographic in your head. Now, Tekir Efendi's demographic is young, urban, or middle-aged maybe, but definitely urban, definitely educated, definitely upper middle class, good income. The things that they're going to sell are not going to be cheap. And so that is the kind of identity that he's in search of, and you should be thinking about your own client like that as well, and then design everything accordingly, according to those keywords. So, just to add, there's an old aktar in Turkey, a spice merchant or dry goods merchant, called Mecit Efendi. And Mecit Efendi is a little bit like that. They are nowadays producing all kinds of body products, shampoos, soaps, vitamins, other kinds of health supplements, candles, scents, aromatherapy things, lots and lots of different things. Not just they're no longer selling spices, and I use their products. Their products are great. So I was just looking at that bottle of shampoo with Mecit Efendi written on it, and I said, hey, how about if my tabby cat that I have here, my big fat tabby cat, decides to become a spice merchant as well? And I started to call him Tekir Efendi. And so that's where the story actually is coming from. So it's good to invent stories for branding identities, and then to proliferate them according to those stories. And so that's it. That's what I wanted to talk about. And good luck with the project.